Welcome to the lucky 13th episode of The Kyle Olson Show. I'm going to do my best today to string a few coherent sentences together, which sadly is probably the same thing presumptive Democrat nominee for President Joe Biden says before he appears in front of a camera.
And I was hospitalized for a while, a long time ago, with an aneurysm.
This was Joe Biden speaking during a live stream with SEIU, the union that represents a whole lot of hospital workers. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who doesn't struggle to remember the word aneurysm, especially when they had an aneurysm and emergency surgery in 1988? Here's how he described his hospital stay.
And I had a nurse nurses at Walter Reed Hospital who would bend down and whisper in my ear. Wow. And go home and get me pillows. They would make sure they'd actually, probably nothing ever taught in, you can't do it in the COVID time, but they'd actually breathe in my nostrils to make me move, to get me moving.
Is it standard practice for nurses to breathe into the nostrils of a patient to get them to move? What is he, a dog? Or this, the dominating topic of the year.
To find ourselves in a position for COVID-9, including 830 Wisconsin.
Who among us hasn't called it COVID-9 or COVID-900? I remember just last week I caught myself calling it COVID-9000. Thank goodness I'm not running for president. Here's more from Biden's live stream with SEIU.
Trump has done in going his spreading of racism, the way he deals with people based on the color of their skin, their national origin, where they're from, is absolutely sickening. No sitting president has ever done this. Never, never, never. No Republican president has done this. No Democratic president. We have racists, and they've existed. They've tried to get elected president. He's the first one that has.
Joe Biden will say anything and do anything to get elected. Joining up with Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, both self-proclaimed socialists, to write his platform is proof of that. But maybe Joe Biden needs a little history lesson. I'm sure he's heard of the 28th president, Woodrow Wilson. Old Joe might have been alive during his administration. I don't know. Wilson, a progressive Democrat, was referred to by that right-wing rag, The Atlantic, as, quote, racist. In June, Princeton University decided to strip Wilson's name from its public policy school. Here's a quote. The trustees conclude that Woodrow Wilson's racist thinking and policies make him an inappropriate namesake for a school or college whose scholars, students, and alumni must stand firmly against racism in all its forms. That's Joe Biden's fellow Democrat, Woodrow Wilson. Here's a headline from July 6th at the New Republic. Woodrow Wilson was even more racist than you thought. The guy showed a movie in the White House called Birth of a Nation, which the New Republic described as, quote, over the top in its glowing portrayal of the Ku Klux Klan. Joe Biden, spare us the moral lectures on racism when that was the basis of your political party's founding. During a fundraiser this week, Joe Biden told supporters that he thinks President Trump will try to, quote, steal the election by arguing that mail-in ballots don't work. Yes, the guy who votes by mail, Donald Trump, he votes absentee, thinks that mail-in ballots don't work. Biden wasn't done. He said he thinks Trump will say they're, quote, not real, they're not fair. My reaction to this is similar to if a nurse was blowing air into my nostrils. This is not the first time he's said such a thing. He told The Daily Show the same thing in June. He thinks Trump will try to steal the election. In April, Biden claimed that Trump is going to try to delay the election. I don't know how he would do that, since that's slightly, just slightly, unconstitutional. But who needs to worry about the practical details? Sadly, Biden isn't the only one who thinks like this. Listen to this montage of cable news talking heads and members of Congress, yes, members of Congress, saying such things, put together by Tom Elliott from Grabian News.
I think we were looking at potentially a trial run for a kind of a genuine attempt to through intimidation and potentially through force to try to steal this election.
If he loses, and I expect that he will, we have to be prepared for things that this nation has never faced before. And unfortunately, that could involve the use of, these forces.
It has been suggested that this is a trial run for the President of the United States, who may be organizing to not accept what happens when we have the election.
I think we should all take very seriously the prospect that this is, as I say, a dress rehearsal, a trial run.
You don't draw a line in the sand. This country may be looking down the barrel of martial law in the middle of an election.
This is, I guess, the president's own version of martial law, since the real military has kind of pushed back from doing that.
Is there anybody, having watched Donald Trump for the last 3.5 years, who doesn't think that Donald Trump would try to employ martial law if he thought it was the only way he could stay in power? I ask you, Joe, is there anybody who's sensible who comes on this show who doesn't think that that's possible?
Joe Biden told us this week that Gretchen Whitmer is still on his short list for vice president. A surprise, given that prominent Democrats, whatever that means, said she was lopped off from the list back in June. Speaking of Gretchen Whitmer, she and Republican legislators in Lansing negotiated a budget deal this week after they determined they were short a mere $2.2 billion. See, when you close the economy and order workers, literally the taxpayers, to stay home, suddenly the government doesn't have any money to spend. Funny how that works. So on Wednesday, the governor issued an executive order 2020-155, which means that was her 155th executive order, to cut $115 million from the Michigan State Police budget, $392 million from the Department of Corrections, and over $36 million from the Department of Health and Human Services. So she cut $115 million from the state police, which some might say is defunding the police. But then she replaced a portion of those funds, $107 million, with funds from the federal coronavirus stimulus bill. Now, by my math, I went to a government school, I admit, 115 minus 107 is 8. So she cut $8 million. The Mackinac Center, for whatever reason, didn't like this narrative that grew that said that the governor was defunding the police. And this is something that I wrote about at Breitbart. This is from David Gunther from the Mackinac Center. He said, a dishonest narrative has started to spread in the last 24 hours, in some instances by people who should know better, about Governor Gretchen Whitmer defunding the Michigan State Police and Michigan Department of Corrections. No such defunding occurred. He goes into this example because he thinks that the average person can't understand Michigan legislature speak. And so he ended his piece by saying the extent of slicing and dicing of selectively edited information to morph yesterday's actions into a police defunding narrative is well out of bounds. Critics of her policies and actions diminish their ability to hold her accountable when they are not measured and don't confine themselves to verifiable facts. The mainstream media joined the Mackinac Center in defending Governor Whitmer. But here's the dirty little secret they're not telling you. All of this shuffling around of money, state money, federal money, is for this fiscal year. That's why I just talked about those dates. That's to fix the catastrophic problems for this year. Next fiscal year, which starts in 10 weeks, has a $3 billion hole. And all indications are that the the schools, are the loudest ones with their hand currently out, so the chances of the feds bailing out the states again are slim to none. So Gretchen Whitmer's $115 million cut will stand and likely won't have any of the federal money to, quote, backfill it, as they like to say. What's the Mackinac Center and the mainstream media going to do, or what are they going to say then? I'll be waiting. But I won't hold my breath. This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back with Matt Boyle of Breitbart News.